Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Danielson. I'm secretary of an organization called S.O.U.L, Wisconsin. One of my fellow board members, John Lund, is here. S.O.U.L is actually in its 24th year of existence. From day one, with the first expansion transmission line in Wisconsin, we demonstrated, as all of the organizations here are talking about, basically individual and community solutions to things. We believe that our organization's byline is that we represent the priorities of communities, the land, and individuals. S.O.U.L Wisconsin actually stands for Save Our Unique Lands, and every community, of course, is unique, as stated. But the what we're working, I'm going to just talk briefly about some of the concepts that we're wrestling with right now. It's mostly a matter of scale and understanding where we are right now in this dichotomy or fork in the road between whether we're going to move towards individual, community, what we call distributed solutions, self-sufficiencies like Samantha was talking about earlier today, the non-corporate path like Spark was talking about earlier today. And I'm just going to touch on some of those concepts. Before I do that, though, I want to mention what an incredible refuge it is to be with this group today. Most of the time that I give these talks, I do in a room where most of the people in the room are sponsored by corporate money. And none of the people that you've heard talk today, as best as I know, none of these organizations take any money from corporate interests. And that, by the way, is right down the dividing line between what we're talking about. I find it is extremely important with the internet and all of the extensiveness that we have in communications right now. Any person's email mailbox fills up with 80% corporate messaging. And just do it sometime. Just check and see. So that is an important thing for us to understand when we're in this network for peace and justice and our priorities. Okay, it's not, it's worth repeating all the time. So this map here is basically a map. And notice that we need to get the tweak on the left, right. Our computer hasn't figured out, which is really smart, but
I think people are seeing it on the other end. Actually,
well, you know what? Anyway, we can split that around, but this is a unique view of Wisconsin here. But the information on this map and the other maps that are in here, there's a lot of details. I will send is it Vicky a PDF so you can access these things and zoom into these. But just to hit on a couple of the big points. If we do not go down, increasingly down the personal, community, customer priority, solution path, inventive, ingenuity, all of local economy supporting path, the corporations have a really damn path laid out for us. And I'm not saying that we're going to, the utilities don't wake up in the morning asking, gee, how can I help Samantha? How can I help Rob? How can I help? No one does that. So I don't spend any time, I don't have any doubts that the utilities, with their largest industry in the United States, are going to accomplish a great deal of what they are interested in doing. But I am not going to spend 1 minute every day, any day, boosting their corporate agenda. And so this is like basically, okay, here is the corporate agenda. If you look at this chart here, the top column here has our existing generation in Wisconsin, which I'll just throw out some simple numbers, 16,000 units or megawatts of generation. That's plenty of that, more than enough generation to operate our energy needs in Wisconsin. Last year, we used the same amount of electricity in Wisconsin that we did in 2005.
Wow.
Okay, why? Because we're doing the smart things. We're doing efficiency. And even if we don't try, we still manage to reduce our use. Madison, Wisconsin. Have you been there recently? Seen the amount of building that's going on in Madison, Wisconsin? Madison's energy use is the same today as it was in 2010. Because all of those improvements, all of those buildings that are being built are being maximized in terms of efficiency or a good part of it. So since 1999, S.O.U.L, Wisconsin has intervened in at least a half dozen cases before the Public Service Commission, analyzing alternatives to corporate investments. Okay, and you got it. It's always like put the money into customers. In every single case, the money is far more cost effectively spent by boosting up the energy efficiency program, boosting up the incentives and stuff that we're talking about. The utilities are terrified. They know that by adding all of these costs, and we'll talk about them, onto our electric bills over time, our electric bills are going to go so high that all medium, low income families, you're not going to have any choice but to be self-sufficient. Now, when will that happen? You know, it will happen. Will it happen soon enough to save some of our precious and unique land? That's the thing that I'm interested in, is emphasizing the preciousness of our land. John, all of these people that you've heard talk today are all, you know, experts in the world about how placing our local resources is the top priority, right? So it'll come back, and we will end up becoming self-sufficient, what Samantha and I call the distributed future. But it's a question of how fast we can ramp up that incremental, how much land we can literally save. Once a power plant is permitted by the state of Wisconsin, the utility is given site control of that in perpetuity. It's effectively, and so if you look, so all of these acres and miles that I'm going to talk about here, this land will go out of the control of a local municipality and into the long-term control of a utility, the largest corporations in the world. The finance industry is the largest industry in the United States. The utilities are the #1 customer. Okay, so this is very, very serious long-term thinking. And I'm not saying that we're going to, you know, disrupt this billions of dollars, but we can on a community by community level. Forrest was talking about working with communities of practicing. My S.O.U.L is the same thing. My phone rings off the hook from these communities who are saying, what the heck is going on here? Wait, this is unbelievable. If you zoom in and look at this map, there's 16,000. The corporate plan for Wisconsin is to quadruple the amount of energy that is generated in our state by 2050 at the price tag of $78 billion. Okay, so there's all of this, and the cost right now, we're using about 162 square miles of land for our generation needs. That will skyrocket to 5,000 square miles. Okay, so we're talking, so if you look at this little area right here, around Stevens Point, that is a little map there, that's in Portage County.
Yeah.
Just take it's on page 2. Just take a look at this map here. These are projects that are what we call in the MISO queue. These are projects that the utilities have announced, and you can see there's divided up into 4 different areas: A, B, C, and D. Okay. Bottom line, 25 square miles, Portage County. Plastered in solar panels. And that's just the solar panels. That's not the associated land or anything around 25 square miles of land in the county occupied by utility. Just the first of a magnitude of increase of 4. So that would easily go to 100 square miles in a county to if the corporations have their ways. And these are called districts because if you look, this particular district, I call it the utility district, is because it's where you have your high capacity transmission lines, where the substations are. And because of the right of way to the substations, they have to, I don't know. Yeah. Well, we'll get it. You have to zoom in on the PDF to see it, but the districts are not arbitrary. They're there because of the expansion transmission lines that are here, the 345. These ones that are in black, these are the ones they want to add. And these exist, as you can see, these existing districts are here because of the transmission lines already. And one of them, by the way, starts in Genoa, right? So we're nuclear power energy because of the crossover runs down and so forth through. So this is to say that this is an expansionist plan is really understated. This is amazing. This is like we've never seen anything like this degree of build out in Wisconsin. That's basically the concept. So I guess you want to say, well, why is this happening in Wisconsin? There's a little paragraph on your handout on the front page with the map here that has the statutes on the right hand side of the page. Right here on this side. This is good for me. This is mirror training. They're basically, and Wisconsin is one of two states that have really carte blanche for this. Indiana is the other one. We passed laws, and right before the turn of the century, it came at the period of Dick Cheney is actually behind the whole thing in 1992. Vice President Dick Cheney, who it's just that simple. I mean, he was a mastermind of regulation, and that's what we're living with today. So basically, what in Wisconsin, if you're a public utility, Lee Energies, for example, and you want to build a coal power plant, out in 1970, 1980, when they wanted to build the Oak Creek power plant, I went to like 7 public hearings about like why you can't build this public power plant, you know, and you had to do an environmental impact statement and you had to prove the cost effectiveness, and it was just took years and years for them to get that power plant approved, right? Today, in Wisconsin, we have what's called, they have all of those rules that apply, environmental impact statement, cost benefit analysis, look at alternatives, all of those rules that apply to a big project, whether a transmission line or a power plant. Merchant utilities, corporate utilities are exempted. They're exempted. So they do like the power plant, the solar power plant that was just approved in Southeast Dane County, the Koshkonong power plant. So 1 million solar panels, right? 10 square miles of land impacted, 4 watersheds, no environmental impacts. None, zero. The utility wanted to line the main street on Highway 12 going all the way into Cambridge with solar panels 25 feet away from the road. The municipal government had absolutely no ability to change that whatsoever. They asked, so none of these, so there's 2 components. One, there's no accountability for ratepayers or environment or whatever. And the other thing is that the local municipalities can't pass laws to regulate where panels can be. Right? So you're going to see, trust me, in the news, you're going to see an enormous amount of uprising from communities in Wisconsin. They might even like this idea of it, but the idea that they take away your main landmarks and there's nothing that you can do about it, right? There's no water treatment. Yes.
What's the difference? Can you explain the difference between a merchant utility and the ones that are, is it just merchant or public?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's right. I mean, the utilities, then the public utilities refer to the merchant utilities as unregulated.
Okay, so the other ones would be the public utilities.
The public, it's a horribly confusing, sometimes called investor-owned utilities for a little clearer understanding. And Dairyland isn't basically they're in the wholesale energy market. They play by the same rules. They're wannabe IOUs, basically. That's why they behave.
They're not regulated by public service.
They're not regulated, which we didn't even touch upon the nightmare in terms of the nuclear issue for that. But anyway, so you can see the consequences here in these statutes, and nothing will change about this in Wisconsin until we get our lawmakers to change these 2 rules.
No, he's thinking that this is now forming the now.
This is we create Dick Cheney's idea to link all of the utilities together into an economic market to increase competition. Right? That created the world's largest, plus the world's largest machine at the same time. Right? For example, one of my friends said, well, shouldn't shouldn't transmission lines be regulated on a national level, right? Shouldn't we do that? Because now we have all of these, needs for all of these power plants we don't have. And I said, the truth of the matter is, FERC regulates all of the utilities, and it's not regulated by the federal government. It's one of these like the reserve banks were during the 2008 housing crisis when they made all the bogus loans. And we said, whoa, gee, this is what happens when you don't regulate the banking industry. That's happened with the utilities on the order of 20 years ago now. So the monopoly is not even actually can't even capture what's happening. Right. Sam.
So Rob, if a merchant utility wanted to install a solar power plant and look at the impacts to the environment, look at how it was actually being installed in a way that would replenish the soil and build the soil and pollinators, grazing for sheep or whatever, would you have a problem with that? It was done right.
Well, first of all, that's not impossible what you described because of the competitive environment. If one developer would come along and offer negotiating with the local municipality or to offer doing the environmental impact statement, they would be completely externalized from all of their colleagues because they would basically be volunteering. They would become non-competitive. They would be volunteering to do something that's not required by law. Corporations do not do that, right? They basically are saying like, well, hey, we'll be having a meet with you and stuff like that, but we're not going to tell you anything about the
So you're
proposal.
saying it's not likely, but you're not saying it's not possible.
I personally feel as far as the big, okay. What you're saying is, do I wake up in the morning and think about what utilities want? The answer to that is no, right? I am not, if it were my community, right, that was being proposed like that, I would have some very definite ideas about what I would ask for. But for starters, I don't think that you really should we should not be occupying 25 square miles in the Portage area for solar panels, right? We should not be occupying land. We should not be using land that can be left open for diverse uses, including agriculture and stuff, and locking it down and placing it in the hands of utility site control indefinitely. I think that's a really, really bad idea. 5 megawatts is what we consider the top end of the distributed range. That's about 40 acres. Best way to answer that question is go find a solar array that's 40 acres and look at it and see how you feel, what your gut tells you about that. If you drive between here and Madison, you can stop off, is it Lone Rock, east of right at the Lone Rock, and you look at the highway and north, that's a 50 megawatt. Takes you about 2 mile drive to drive past that 50 megawatt solar array. If you also go to the solar array and watch them scrape off all of the topsoil completely, off of the tops completely. I mean, they just completely scrape off every inch of topsoil, pile it up in a giant pile, and then poke a million holes in the ground. Right, put the solar panels down and then dust the topsoil back over it, right? Literally, and then say, oh, we're going to have pollinators, we're going to have prairie grasses, it just doesn't, there's no studies to indicate that you can restore land by starting off by scraping off the topsoil and then sweeping it back and planting seeds on that. The point I'm making is that I want to emphasize what the slightest nod that this this scale will build out, what's really going to happen with the slightest nod. I focus on working with John, talking about what he's done with this hot water exactly like you have, because the power of saving 1 square inch of land right? The power of doing that is invested in our awareness of our abilities and our, and our political strength to be able to stand up and say, I think every municipality in Wisconsin should be able to say whether or not they want to have half of their township plastered with solar panels or not. Aside from what the landowners in that town feel like they're gonna bring home in the way of money. It's real money too. That's the other thing. Just like when you're dealing with corporations, you deal with violence, right? That's how corporate, so they're not interested in like doing the right thing for the community, Sam. They're giving each property owner $1,600 an acre per year with a 2% escalator. So the value of that land that they're going to be paying for that acre of land is well over $100,000 over 50 years. Now, tell me a corporation who's going to pay out $100,000 in rent money, right, to a landowner. They're just going to buy. They're going to buy this land. They're going to own it straight out. Right, so they have the landowners who are happy to give up their land for $100,000 an acre. Think about that, right? They have all of these perks in the state laws, so they don't have to justify. They don't have to talk about environment. They don't have to talk about what the impact is of the ratepayer, et cetera. So they have all of the perks from the legal side, and they basically just own. They own the place. They will literally own the place. Right, yes.
So you're basically advocating for smaller communities and individuals to do as much as possible.
Yeah, and the same as so in the very first day that we intervened with the very first transmission line, we demonstrated that you could take the expansion transmission line, do a low voltage alternative and save millions of dollars and not have all of these power plants that literally exist in Stevens Point today.
What is the advantage to the companies to take over this land and build all of these antennas? Do they want to try to control energy at a cheaper rate for themselves and charge us? Or what's this fall?
That's a good point.
Yeah, part of what happens, what I really find the problem with emerging power plants is they're able to access the land, build these power plants, whether wind, solar, or other means. When it's a merchant power plant, they don't have environment impact statement for assessment that they have to do. And part of that, a really important part of that, is alternative. They have to explore alternatives. And it was really disappointing, Badger Cooley, the PSC's own engineers came up with an alternative. This was $1 million. That was like the line cost $500 million. And the reason they do that is because they have guaranteed cost recovery. So what happens with the merchant power plants is companies like We Energies buys them after they've been developed. So they can bypass the whole environmental impact statement, exploration of alternatives, and so on. Once they access them, they get their money back for guaranteed cost recovery, plus they get guaranteed return on equity. So the utility model is to build as much as they can, so their capital wealth is greater. And then every year, every 2 years, they go to the PSC for a rate adjustment. So they are guaranteed to recover all of their costs plus a percentage of power. And for generation, it's 9%. So if they own $1 million, they get all that plus 9%. That's built into the rates that they charge. What we're doing with decentralized is they're not getting that income. They're not getting the income from the capital. They're not getting the income from the selling of the energy. So that's why we are in competition with utilities. My own personal view is every school, every government building, every Walmart parking lot should be shaded with solar panels. They should be distributed closer to where the energy is consumed, rather than remote, which requires very, very expensive transmission lines and all this capital investment that just keeps making the costs go up. And what the energy analysts, when I was reading about it like 10 years ago, what they feared was energy costs were going to get so high that there was going to be what they call grid defection. That's people making their own power, having batteries, but what will happen is upper class people and well-off middle class people can afford to do that. Working class people can't. So eventually would require government subsidies to working class people to afford energy because it's just too expensive. So that's why Rob's thing is a fork in the road or the paths. And it's a really hard thing to do when you have this monopoly that basically has guaranteed income for a certain way of doing business.
I would follow up on this.
I was just to say that a few years ago, they were wanting to put this power line through their area. And so I went along with a lot of other people to, go and see about it. And what I actually figured out is they were wanting to bring out power from North Dakota and, from way and put it through our area. It was not anything locally produced. They needed that line, they wanted to take it to show.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it turns out that is really not the case anymore. The utilities don't really, I'll finish up, but basically the export model is, this is about the simplified John's thing. Utilities don't make money by selling power. They make money by putting steel in. Because they get guaranteed return on that capital, and it goes on indefinitely. And site control assures that they're going to get income from that. Think about it. They purchase land, they can rate expense the land purchase on ratepayers, and they get that in perpetuity. So there will be a time, there may be a time in the near future where those solar panels are ripped out, and the utilities making all the money from expensing the land underneath the solar panels. So it's the same old model. Right? And in capitalism, the model, another simple principle is he who owns gets the benefits in capitalism. So when we talk about incentives to put in and, electric hot water heater and do all the efficiency and stuff like that, those are assets that we own and we get the benefit. So that's why the utilities are terrible, because it's so much cheaper, so much more liberating, so much a better place.
They're terrified of true capitalists, true competition.
The competition, like Dick Cheney, exactly right. Dick Cheney, open up the competition, let the customers into the model. Anyway, thanks, thank you.
There's just one piece of this regarding equity and justice, and that is that there's a large number of people who are renters, and they tend to be more low income.
Right.
They do not have control of their water heater. They do not have control over how their apartment is heated, yet they're required to pay their electric bills. So it is that group of people that I'm putting forth this idea of maybe there is an alternative way to create a merchant power plant that does the right thing, that is owned by the people who would benefit from it. And I do believe there's ways that you can benefit the land if you have to install a power plant where instead of growing corn and soybeans doused with glyphosate, you instead build that soil. And if it is ripped out, if the solar panels and the posts are ripped out at some point, it's not completely destroying the soil. There is a way to do that. That is what I'm suggesting. That's the equity and justice piece I want to bring up.
But I think it's better, how about, granting me the home or landlord, discount or a subsidy of some sort, so I can have a solar panel on their property.
You know what? The IRA is gonna allow you to do some of that. There are incentives built in for that, which I didn't focus on today because I know more about the residential. But there are incentives built in on that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing about that, Sam, I agree with what you're saying, but remember, merchant is not owned by the community.
No.
So you're really mixing, so your model is.
Be owned by the community. There's nothing that says merchant couldn't be owned by the community.
No, merchant needs literally owned by the third party utilities.
It's
It's
under
under statute.
community solar, like, is
Which
open.
would be
But
paid
owned by us, and that's the key thing. The other key trick is it a good proposal? The answer to that is who owns it? If the utility owns it, it's bad.